it's Amy from Amy's Free Motion Quilting Adventures, and I've got a video blog post for you today, a tutorial on making this great curved cross hatching. And I've already stitched this one out, feathered it along the sides, and I just love this double curved template that I've got for curved cross hatching. It just gives a really elegant effect, but it's a little tricky to work on. So I wanted to show you, and of course the first time you do something like this, it's always pretty easy because you just lay it out there, but I'm putting this into 4 separate corners of my quilt. So I want it to look fairly uniform. I've also got different blocks. This is a sampler that I'm doing. So I've got different pieced blocks in each corner. So I've got to mark it off just right. So in the original block, the first block I did, the piecing guided me in the corners for the placement of this line. Can you see the line? I hope you can see the line. I'm going to redraw it so you can see it better as I go through this. But what I did was I just measured it for the second block. First thing I did was mark the corner, the 45 degree going into the corner. Thankfully, it also lined up with the center of this block next to the corner. And that's just a straight line, and it's starting to fade. We've had a lot of rain here in Virginia. And so it's very humid, and I use this air erasable marker, which it actually dissolves in the humidity of the air. So the more moisture in the air, the faster it erases itself. So let's get that a little bit darker so you can see it. Can you see that? Yes, you can. All right. So I've got that, and then I've measured in 1.25 inches, I think it is, from the corners. And that's not the edge of the quilt, that is from the corner of the block next to it. Sorry, it's 1.5 inches. Measured off 1.5 inches from one corner. Let's do the 1.5 inches over here. I'm just giving myself a tick mark to work from. Let's darken this one so you can see it. And this is a fine line air erasable marker. I like it because it gives a nice fine line and gives me a little bit more accuracy when I'm marking my projects. So I like using it. And this is the Rhonda Byers Double S ruler. This is the small. And you can see I've got grippers on it. And I've also got a little tape. The tape helps me position this ruler on my quilt because it is not a symmetrical curve. So depending on where I'm placing it, I get different curves. So we want to make sure I'm lining it up in the same manner, in the same spots that I want to look the same. So for the first pass, and yes, I am going to mark my stitch lines because, like I said, this ruler is a little tricky to work with, and if I slide my ruler down just even 1/2 inch, I'm going to get a different shaped curve. So I want to line it up, and I'm lining up. I put a little bit of painter's tape here. That just lets me know I'm using the end of the ruler at that tick mark I drew. And then I've got another bit of painter's tape up here to help me do the point. So I'm just going to draw along my ruler. I'm making sure that my pen is not tipped so that the pen doesn't end up marking, say, 1/8 of an inch away from where it really needs to be. Hopefully you can see that. Let's check. Yes, you can. All right. So I've marked my stitching line. Remember, my ruler will end up having to be 1/4 inch away. Now, here's the thing you have to remember. To do this side, I need to flip my ruler over. You don't want to just move it over. You're going to get a totally different curve. And the one side is not the same curve as the inside. Alright, so I have it here. I'm going to flip it over. I'm going to line it back up with that tick mark over here. And this line here. and just go ahead and mark my line. And I'll tell you, it may not be completely perfect sometimes if you're not being extremely careful as you go. And that's okay. If you take these precautions to measure out your center line, measure in from the edge, making sure you're using about the same side of the ruler, or not the same side, but the same stretch along the curve, no one is going to compare one corner to another. And if they do, you don't need those people in your life. Okay, so I've got it marked, and I'm going to stop the video and get ready to stitch this out for you. Hello, I'm back at my sewing machine. This is Amy's Free Motion Quilting Adventures, but you know that. And I'm ready to stitch this curved cross hatching that I'm doing in the corners. And I have stitched along the edge of my quilt to secure the corner. And I have stitched over here to my first tick mark. And I've got my ruler over here. Now, because I use that very corner of my ruler to line up my stitching line right there at the edge, when I drew my lines, really the ruler lines up here, and of course you can see it's not touching the foot. So I'm just going to slide it down for a little bit just till I get started. And of course I've already got my line marked, so I can really use that as a guide. I try not to mark all my stitching lines. It's just really inefficient and kind of defeats the purpose of using the rulers for quilting. I love that I don't have to do a lot of marking with these. And so now that I've started, I've slid it back down. And remember, it's staying about 1/4 of an inch away. I'm just sliding along my ruler. Do not get paranoid about following that stitched line if you've got it marked. Obviously, if you're getting way off, you need to stop and adjust. But don't let the fact that the line is marked allow you to get paralysis of stitching because you want to be exactly on that line. Nobody's going to tell if you're 1/16 of an inch off or so. So now I'm going to take my ruler and I'm flipping it over, and I know you couldn't really see that very well, but if I just flipped it over like I did when I was drawing, I'd smack my camera and my machine too, I think. So I have flipped it over and I'm lining it up. It's going to be over here now. And I do have that line marked. I'm going to just pivot my quilt just a little bit. Now this is a full 1/4 inch thick ruler. So if you've got a low shank machine, you want to make sure it's not positioned where it's going to go behind your foot. That is one issue with these rulers. I cannot see where I'm going at this point. Oh, it's so humid. I think my line has disappeared in one spot. Anyway, we've got it lined up now. That's no biggie. There we are. And I'm getting just a little off, so I'm just going to adjust my ruler just a tiny bit. I don't move it away from my foot, even if I'm off at my foot. That allows me to get a nice smooth line. If I take the ruler away from the foot when I'm adjusting, it is going to leave a little jagged spot. So always adjust with your ruler up against the foot. Unless you want to rip the stitches out. Alright. So I've got it there. Let's see if I can rotate my camera a little bit here. Show you what I've got so far. Now I'm set up to go ahead and do a frame around this area that I'm going to stitch. And so I am just going to go over here in the ditch between blocks until the edge of my foot is alongside that line of stitching, lining up my ruler. Remember, because I use that very end of the ruler to mark with, it doesn't reach it very well, so be careful doing that. It'll get easier as the lines get smaller as we finish in this cross hatching. I'm going to reposition my hands so that you're not just looking at the back side of my hand. Let's slide my ruler just a little bit. We want it to make a perfect 1/4 inch spaced frame. And there's my miter mark that goes diagonally into the corner. And that tells me where to stop. Flip the ruler over. And line everything back up. And this is where it's important to note that I've got grippers on both sides of my ruler. And that's so that I can use both sides of this ruler. There are some rulers you may not need to flip over, but this one, you need to flip it. Got grippers on both sides. Anyway, I think you get the idea. I'm going to start my cross hatching. And this video is getting quite long, so I'm going to just do a couple of lines to give you the idea, and then finish this block out without the camera. I do carry this ruler and these grippers and even the marking pen in my new online shop. That can be found at Amy's Quilting Adventures.com. And there, my stitches got a little bit long, but that's okay. This is a teaching sample. And as you start getting smaller with your lines, they don't always line up exactly. That is one of the tricks with some of the curved rulers. Get that repositioned just so. One thing to remember when you're working with templates and you're flipping them over is that it's a little harder to see some of the markings because they're marked only on one side of the template. You can certainly see through them, but this clear acrylic kind of acts like, you know, like a swimming pool. You stick a stick into a swimming pool, it looks bent. So there's my first line of cross hatching. And I did it a little bit differently than I normally do cross hatching. And I'm doing each of these corners just slightly different, doing a different variation. And this is actually not cross hatching, and I should have mentioned that a little sooner, where I'm just going to the point and echoing it. Like I said, this is a teaching sampler, so I'm just doing a little bit different. But because this curve is exactly the same as my original one, it's going to give an overall look of uniformity until someone gets up and looks at it. And then I'll be feathering in this edge here, and it's just going to look great. So let me show you that original corner again before I turn the video off. And you can see the rest of this quilting by going to my post at Amy's Free Motion Quilting Adventures. You can also go to my shop, which links back to the blog, and that is at amysquiltingadventures.com. Again, the blog itself is freemotionquiltingadventures.com. The shop is amysquiltingadventures.com. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.